Hello, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about why not having a secure connection in our childhoods affects us so deeply. Because I think that so many of us out there are living with patterns of behavior, mindsets, feelings, emotions, things that we think are wrong with us, things that we think make us broken, that we have been blaming and shaming ourselves for our entire lives about. And we think that it is because there is something wrong with us. We think it is because we are flawed and we are broken and we are weak and we are just missing something or we are doing something wrong. And we are living in this world of trying to fix ourselves because we're not understanding where our pain and where our lack of capacity and all of these habits that we have that we're trying to get rid of are coming from. And so we're essentially trying to fix a problem with the exact wrong diagnosis. So we are noticing the symptoms. We have symptoms, but we have a completely false, out of alignment misunderstanding about the cause of those symptoms. So we keep trying to treat the symptoms as the disease we think it is instead of treating the actual disease we have, and therefore we never get anywhere. And this concept is something that is just so important for us to grasp and to understand. And it's something that in the self-help, spirituality, and personal growth worlds, it's just, we're missing it. We're missing it so often that I have seen in my practice just over and over again, people who have done decades of work on themselves, like literally bought hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of programs and coaching and therapy and supplements and nervous system resets and blah 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 blah, and they've never been able to actually touch the cause of what's going on. They haven't been able to actually shift the pain. They haven't been able to shift their patterns. They haven't been able to remedy the things in their life that, like, their self-sabotaging behaviors, their coping mechanisms, the way that they numb, the way that they do all of these things that seemingly hurt themselves, and they haven't been able to actually get to a place where they feel better about themselves, where they feel better about who they are, where they are able to not have just, crippling self-doubt or self-hate or all of these things. And it's heartbreaking because it's just this one thing that keeps being missed. And when we miss it, obviously, again, it's like literally treating every disease under the book or under the sun in the book except for the one you have. And so we just continually are working to fix a problem, but we're not seeing the root cause, and therefore everything that we do is temporary solution at best, right? It's dealing with the root or with the top symptom at best. It's temporary fixes, temporary changes, temporary highs that always fade away, and then we never actually make progress towards feeling better in real reality because we're stuck looping. Okay? So this is what we're going to explore today, is just how deeply not having a secure connection in our childhoods affects us and what it will look like when this is what happened, so that you can start to say, okay, maybe some of these things that are going on with me are not me just being broken. It's not that I just showed up in my adulthood and chose to fuck everything up. It's not that I'm weak. It's not that there's something inherently wrong with me. It's not that, I choose toxic relationships because I'm attracting something horrible, or because I deserve something bad, or any of the, like, this is what I was handed. My foundations weren't good. My foundations were rotten. And so it doesn't matter how much I try to redecorate the house. It doesn't matter how much I try to change everything above the surface. The foundations are always rotten. And therefore, nothing that we build on top is ever going to be what we want it to be. It's never going to feel how we want it to feel, because again, the foundations that we have are not good, and they need to be addressed. And until they are addressed, nothing on top is going to feel better. Okay? So this, if you have been working on yourself forever, if you've been doing this work, if you've been trying to heal, if you've been trying to fix yourself, if you've been trying to change yourself, if you've been trying and trying and trying and trying, and feeling like you never actually make real progress, in the sense that you permanently shift into a new place, you permanently make changes to your self-sabotaging behavior, meaning you actually don't do those things anymore. You actually have been able to shift out of your coping mechanisms to the point where you don't do them anymore. They don't keep coming back. Where you actually fundamentally feel and think differently about yourself. You're not constantly fighting against your self-hate or against your sense of not being good enough. And you're not constantly stuck in this cycle of feeling better for a little while and then not feeling better, and then feeling better for a little while and then not feeling better. But you're actually making progress to the point where you don't go back to how you used to be. I want you to understand that that's not your fault. It's not because you're doing something wrong. It's not because you're broken. It's not because you're weak or lazy or not trying hard enough. It's just probably because the actual issue is not being looked at and not being addressed. So this is what we are going to talk about today, okay? So this. When we grow up without a secure connection, when we grow up without a secure connection in our childhoods, when we grow up and our caregivers don't make us feel like no matter what happens, they are going to be there for us, like they love us even when we're upset, even when we're acting out, even when we're making mistakes, even when we're not living up to expectation, when we don't feel like our needs, generally speaking, are going to be met, and that's just an assumption that we're making because this is what we expect, because that is what happens, right? We know there's going to be food. We know there's going to be safe shelter. We know that when we're hurting, we have a safe place to go. Someone is going to listen to us. Someone is going to validate us. We are going to be attuned to. We are not expected to be little counselors for our caregivers. We are not expected to shut ourselves down or to live up to some extreme expectation that's way outside of who we naturally are. When we don't have that, okay, this is so fundamental to understand. When we do not have that in our early childhood experiences, a good enough secure attachment. So this doesn't mean that caregivers have to be perfect. This doesn't mean that our childhood has to be perfect. All right? Getting traumatized and feeling like you don't have a secure connection comes from repetitively being unsafe. It's not sometimes, like there were a few times where mom got really mad at me and yelled at me, or dad snapped, or right, I didn't get what I wanted for Christmas, or these things. Like, when I'm talking generally speaking, if you did not feel safe in your home, if you did not feel safe to be yourself, if you did not feel safe to have your emotions, if you did not feel like who you were was generally okay, like you didn't need to become a different person to be loved, if you didn't feel like you didn't need to perform in some way to care for your caregivers, if you didn't feel like mom and dad or caregivers, whoever raised you, were safe places for you, right? When you were upset, you could go to them, you could trust them. You could trust them to manage their own emotions. They weren't constantly projecting onto you. You could trust them to feed you and clothe you. If you didn't have that, your little brain and your little body was going to go into an existential crisis. Period. End of story. Okay? Those are our nervous system foundations. Those are our, is the world a generally safe place for me? Or is the world generally not safe for me foundations? This is where we get our stories of whether reality is on our side or not, is in our early childhood experiences with our caregivers either attuning to us and generally speaking taking care of us or not. When we did not have security, when we did not feel safe, when we did not feel like our needs were generally speaking going to be met, when we felt like our personality wasn't right, our emotions weren't allowed, right? Whether that was explicit or subtle. It may not have been that caregivers outright physically abused you. It may not have been that caregivers outright said to you, you can't be like that and you can't do that and these things are right and these things are wrong. It could have been implied. It could have been that caregivers pulled away when you did certain things and you felt abandoned. You felt like no one was going to be there for you when you were sad. You felt like when you were in a mood that wasn't happy, they were going to reject you. And it literally could have been, right? Maybe you grew up in a situation where you were generally in poverty, and it's not that your caregivers didn't want to provide for you, but they couldn't. They couldn't feed you. There was a constant sense of we're not okay in the household. There wasn't that sense of safety. So again, a lot of the time, we look at our caregivers through our adult lens. And we say, well, they were trying their best. They were doing their best, right? They were trying to make ends meet and they couldn't. And it's not their fault. So I can't be upset about that. But the thing is, your childhood self, your child self, was not able to empathize with your caregivers like that. Your child self was not able to see that you were gonna be okay. Your child self was not able to rationalize that this wasn't about me. Instead, when we grow up without that secure attachment, when we grow up not feeling like caregivers are going to be there for us, like they're going to attune to our needs, and like they're going to be able to meet our needs generally. so we feel safe to just grow up. Number one, like I said, it puts us into a state of existential crisis. It puts our little childhood brains and bodies into a state where we now feel like the world around us is not safe. We are not okay. The nervous system shifts out of rest and digest, grow and express, and into fight, flight, freeze. Who do I have to be? What do I have to do? I am not okay. And then the next step from that is when we are in that state of fear as children, the way that we deal with that fear as children is to try to figure out what we are doing wrong that is causing this. Okay? The childhood self cannot reason and rationalize that caregivers are adults, that caregivers are not perfect, that the world is not perfect, that caregivers can be acting and behaving in ways that have nothing to do with us, that caregivers can be wrong, that caregivers can be incorrect about the things that they're rejecting, right? We're not able to say, it's okay that mom and dad reject my emotions. That doesn't make them bad or wrong. Mom and dad are just, right? As adults, we can look back and we can say, well, mom and dad didn't have, or, caregivers didn't have good caregivers. They never were taught how to manage their emotions, so of course they couldn't help me manage mine. It's not their fault. Your childhood self could not do that. Your childhood self could not see that. Your childhood self was not processing it like that. If you grew up in poverty and you were not getting your needs met, your childhood self could not say, mom and dad are working as hard as they can, it's not their fault. Your childhood self was not able to say, it's going to be okay. Right now, you might be an adult who grew up and you can see that you are okay. Your childhood self couldn't see that. Your childhood self could not see that at all. If your caregivers were rejecting you, if your caregivers were rejecting your feelings, if your caregivers were making it unsafe for you to be who you were, if your caregivers were not attuning to you, if you had to care for your caregivers, if you had to walk on eggshells because your caregivers couldn't manage their own emotions, if your caregivers were not able to care for you, whether that was their own choice or completely out of their control, it doesn't matter. Because the way that would have affected you is it would have put you in that state of fear, and then from the childhood perspective, you would have started looking to what you were doing wrong that was causing them to behave that way. Your childhood brain, like I said, could not comprehend that caregivers are imperfect, that caregivers make mistakes, that caregivers can be wrong, that there's a whole big world out there that you're going to step into one day, and you're going to be able to have autonomy where you don't have autonomy now as a child, and you're going to be able to have control where you didn't have control as a child, and all of these things. All your brain knew was, I'm stuck in this forever. This is what life is. Mom and dad reject this, I cannot be it. It is not safe because they are my source of everything. To me, to our childhood selves, mom and dad, caregivers, whoever were our main authority figures, were the source of all things. They were God. And from our childhood perspective, the only reason they wouldn't be showing up for us, the only reason they wouldn't be caring for us, the only reason they wouldn't be providing for us, the only reason that they would be not attuning to our needs, not showing up for us emotionally, rejecting us, shaming us, blaming us, guilting, is because we were broken. The childhood self can see it no other way. And that is something we learn on a nervous system level. We learn that on a nervous system level. We're not learning that from our adult intellect. We're learning that on a deep nervous system, primitive part of our brain, whatever you want to think of it as. We're learning that physically, somatically, existentially. And that's becoming our blueprint for what we're allowed to do and be, for what is and is not acceptable in terms of self-expression, for what to expect in relationships, what to accept and what to reject, what is love. That's where we learn that with our caregivers. What am I allowed to be, and what am I allowed to do, and what am I not allowed to be, and what am I not allowed to do? That's where we learn that with our caregivers. What is wrong with me? We learn that in our childhoods where our caregivers are not able to show up for us. Repeatedly, where we are rejected, where we are abandoned, where we are scapegoated, where we are blamed. That's where all of that comes from. And then as we grow into adults, the more we were made unsafe, the more we had to reject parts of ourselves in order to fit in with our caregivers. The more we had to hide ourselves in order to not be attacked or judged or shamed by our caregivers. The more we had to suppress our emotions. The more we learned that certain emotions were okay and certain emotions were not okay. The more we learned that this is what's expected of me and this is who I have to be in order to be loved. And the farther away that was from who we really are, the more trauma, essentially, we were going to grow up having. The more we had to resist who we are, the more we had to deny our emotions, the more parts of ourselves that our caregivers did not make safe. Those are all the parts of ourselves that we then grew up learning to hate about ourselves. Learning to see as wrong and bad and shameful and broken about ourselves. That is where we learned how to shadow, hate, deny, try and get rid of parts of ourselves. When we did not have a secure connection, this means that as we were growing up, we were not focused on expressing. We were not focused on learning and growing and exploring the world and becoming who we are and figuring out what we liked and didn't like and what was true to us. That's what happens when we have a secure connection. So right, when you look out at people who seem to just know who they are generally, who have passions and they know what those passions are and they have been following them for a while, who are generally speaking comfortable in their own skin, who believe that the world is generally a safe place. That, what you're seeing there, is somebody who had a secure connection growing up. They were given the space to grow and express and become their authentic self, because they had those foundations of safety. When we don't have those foundations of safety, we are going to grow up where our focus was focused on what do I need to do, who do I need to be, what do I need to do for other people, how do I please them, how do I serve them, how do I sneak around, how do I not be seen so that I don't get attacked or so that my needs will get met. It's a completely different perspective that you then take on as a child as you grow up. When you have fundamental safety, your job is then to learn and grow and expand. When you don't have fundamental safety, when your body, when your little child self feels abandoned, shamed, abused, not safe, getting safety is going to be your top priority. Not growing, not becoming who you are, not stepping into your fullness of self, not discovering your passions, not discovering your purpose. That's not your focus. When you don't feel safe, your focus is, what do I have to do? Who do I have to please? What do I have to become or not become to get safety? And that is where we learn our people pleasing. That is where we learn how to reject and deny aspects of ourselves. That is where we learn to suppress our emotions. That is where we learn to be little counselors to everyone around us. That is where we learn how to hide, how to sneak around, how to lie, how to not trust anybody. And then those things, as we become adults, because not being yourself and not feeling safe is very painful, we are then going to grow up to become adults who have self-sabotaging behaviors, who have coping mechanisms, who have unhealthy patterns in love, who don't know how to set boundaries, who are codependent. This is where we develop, maybe sometimes, addiction. We're going to notice that when we did not have that safety, when we did not have that security, our brains and bodies were in constant fight mode, dissociation, flight mode, or fawn. Who do I need to please? This is what it would be. We grow up learning to fight, learning to flee, dissociate, learning to fawn, to people please. But we don't learn how to just be our authentic self. And we learn how to hate ourselves. We learn how to reject ourselves. We learn how to feel like everything about us is wrong. This is where this stuff starts. So no, it's not that you just stepped into your adulthood and chose to sabotage yourself. It's not that you just stepped into your adulthood and had all the tools to figure out who you are and do what you wanted to do and be who you wanted to be, and you just chose not to. If you didn't feel fundamentally safe, you were going to develop ways and methods and tools of trying to make yourself safe that all centered around hating, shaming, blaming yourself, getting rid of yourself, trying to fix yourself. Because as a child, that's the only thing that you could see or reason or understand that you had control over or could be the cause of why you were experiencing what you were experiencing. And then we grow up into adults who continue to believe these things about ourselves. But now it's subconscious, right? Like, you're not necessarily walking around being like, my caregivers always got mad at me and rejected me when I was angry, so now I have a complete lack of ability to express my anger. And therefore, I let people walk all over me. I let people bully me. I let people do all of these things. And I feel constantly depressed. You don't think that, right? We're not going to be aware of that. You're just going to be like, why do I let everyone walk all over me? And why do I feel terrible all the time? You're going to have deep levels of self-hate. That no matter how much spirituality you do, no matter how much self-help you do, no matter how much you try to, forgive your caregivers or see that they didn't try to do anything to harm you or whatever, it's never going to make you feel better because you're not seeing the root. Okay? When we did not have secure connection, we grew up not feeling safe. It sets us on a trajectory, not of self-expression and growth and true expansion, but on trying to figure out how to change ourselves, how to fix ourselves, how to get rid of ourselves, how to cope and numb and sabotage, and being in a state of nervous system dysregulation all the time, and not even recognizing that that's what it is. I literally have had people come to me who were just deeply rejected by their caregivers. They were not safe in their childhoods. And they literally have tried everything. They've been doing things for years. Spiritual retreats, all the yoga, all the meditation, all the self-help, all the self-improvement, trying to figure out their ideal career, trying to figure out this and that. And no one was ever able to just be like, you need to process getting upset at your caregivers for how deeply they made you feel unsafe and unworthy of love. And then from there, I just want to make this very clear that the way that our caregivers loved us is the way we're going to know how to love ourselves. And it's going to be our love map for how we then go out into the world and what kind of relationships we're attracted to. This is huge, and I really want you to understand this. How your caregivers loved you is how you grew up to learn to either love or reject yourself. If your caregivers refused to attune to you, and you constantly had to try to earn their awareness, you are going to be attracted to people who are not able to attune to you, where you have to earn their awareness. If you were demonstrated caregivers that were never there for you when you were down, you are going to learn to feel shame and guilt and like you're doing something wrong when you're down. You won't be able to ask for help. You won't feel safe asking for somebody to care for you. And then you're going to be attracted to people who don't want to help you when you're down, who only like you when you're up. And then it just continues to reinforce the belief systems that you have, that it's not okay to be down, that people don't like it. I get abandoned when I'm down. I can't be like this. That becomes our map. That becomes our filter. This becomes our perception. And then we go out into the world, and that's how we perceive the world. That's how we filter everything. These are the people we're then attracted to, the situations we're attracted to. And then we keep repeating cycles over and over and over again, because that's what's comfortable and familiar to our nervous systems. And then because most of us don't understand true emotional awareness, we walk around as adults, especially in the self-help, spirituality, and personal growth world, and we look at our self-sabotaging behavior. And rather than being able to say, I am doing this because I did not have a secure connection in my childhood, I am sabotaging myself because deep down I feel like this part of me is not allowed to exist. Because caregivers rejected this part, and therefore it made me unsafe. And so I had to get rid of it. And this is why I am behaving how I'm behaving. We go, there's something wrong with me that I'm self-sabotaging. There's something wrong with me that I keep sabotaging myself, and I need to fix myself. And it feels like shit every time, doesn't it? Right? We think this thought. I'm self-sabotaging and I'm shitty. I'm just weak. I'm just lazy. I just need to discipline myself more. I need to do better. Why is it that everyone else can do these things and I can't? And then that feels terrible. And the more terrible it feels, the more we say, and therefore it is true. Right? When I do my coaching work with people, I ask people, like, how does that thought feel? I'm sabotaging myself because I'm shitty and lazy and broken. And they go, it feels true. That's what they say. And what they are actually saying is, it feels familiar. This is a thought I've thought a million times. This is a story I've told myself since I was a child. It's a thought that has been reinforced by my perception of reality and how other people have treated me for my whole life. But when I tune into my actual body and how it feels contracting, it feels heavy, it feels nauseous, it makes me feel sick. And that is because that thought is not true. Okay? We need to learn to understand the difference between a thought that feels familiar and a thought that feels true. A thought that feels true will always feel light, expansive, freeing, connecting, grounding on some level. A true thought will always feel expansive. A thought that is not in alignment with real reality will always feel shitty and contracting. So it doesn't matter how familiar a thought is. If it feels terrible in your body, you cannot tell me that it feels true. You must say it feels familiar. This is a thought I've thought a lot. This is a pattern I took on. Okay? So, and then again, many of us wonder why we continually get into these toxic relationships where we're having to sacrifice ourselves for people, where we're the perpetual counselor, where they tell us that they want to care for us, they tell us that they want to be there for us, they tell us that they want to love us, but in real action and real practice, they can't and they don't. And we keep thinking, what is wrong with me? Why do I deserve this? What am I doing wrong? How am I not showing up enough? How am I not good enough? How am I failing to be a good part? Like all of this stuff. Because the childhood self is not able to recognize this person is just emotionally immature. This person is lying. They are saying one thing and doing another, and they are telling me who they are with their actions, and I need to believe their actions, not their words. We're not able to say, this sometimes isn't about me. This person is not attuning to my needs, and it's not because I don't deserve to have someone attune to my needs. It's because they are not capable, and I am not going to fix them. I am not going to change them. They have to do their own work. We just go, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? How do I change myself? How do I fix myself so that they will love me? Because that's what we learn to do in our childhoods. We don't learn to have strong boundaries. We don't learn to ask for respect. We don't learn to ask to have our needs met. Because in our childhoods, it was demonstrated to us that that's not what love looks like. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to have needs. You're not supposed to express in these ways. And then that's the pattern we play out, and those are the people we're attracted to, and we're not attracted to the people who could attune to us. We're not attracted to the people who could be there for us, because that feels totally unfamiliar to our nervous systems. It feels unsafe even to be around a safe person, because we don't know what to do with that. How we were loved by our caregivers is going to be our love map. That is how we are going to love, and that is the kind of love we are going to look for. And we are going to make it about ourselves instead of being able to understand that sometimes people are just shitty, right? Like, until we can say, oh, my caregivers just failed. The reason they were not there for me, the reason they could not support me, the reason they taught me to hate myself is because they were wrong, is because they were incapable, is because they were emotionally immature. And they bled on me. I didn't cut them. I was not the reason they couldn't provide for me. I was not the reason they were rejecting me. I was not the reason they couldn't attune to my needs. They were shitty. Until we can start to own that, we are always going to think it's our fault. And that is where we never, ever make progress. When we are blaming ourselves for pain that we went through that was not because of us, we will continually be stuck in these patterns of self-help and self-improvement and blaming and shaming ourselves for shit that is not our fault. That was not because of us. And that is like taking shit tons of vitamin C when your problem is that you have a vitamin D deficiency. It doesn't matter how much vitamin C you take. It's never going to solve the problem because you need vitamin D. It's like treating an infection like a parasite. If you have a bacteria and you keep taking an anti-parasite, it doesn't matter how much or what combination of or what time of day you take the anti-parasite. It's never going to touch the bacteria because it's a bacteria. Do you see? It was not your fault that your caregivers failed you. And this, again, is huge work to do. Because it is an absolute existential crisis for us to finally admit that I'm not going to improve myself, fix myself, change myself, become my higher self, get rid of my self-sabotaging behaviors, get rid of my coping mechanisms, get rid of all of these things, become my perfect self, and then life is going to be perfect. Because what we're really looking for is, if I finally improve myself, caregivers are finally going to give me that love and safety that I never got. Right? And our adult mind is like, I'm not waiting for my mom and dad to love me. But if you're still walking around trying to perfect yourself, believing that life is going to be all better when you just stop being shitty, yes, you are. If you're still scapegoating onto your body, if I just perfect my body, if I just get it right, if I just lose this 10 pounds or tone up or whatever it is that the goal is always changing, everything's going to be great in my life, you're still waiting for caregivers to love you perfectly. If you're still believing that parts of your personality are wrong, that emotions that you have are not okay, if you still feel shame, blame, and guilt when you're down or when you're weak or when you have needs or when you have a desire to do something or when you're expressing in some way and you're trying to get rid of it and you're trying to suppress it and you hate these things about yourself, you have not yet accepted that caregivers are never going to perfectly love you. You're still trying to fix yourself in the hopes that one day they will finally love you and make you safe. If you still believe you're failing in your career, you're not making enough money, you're not successful enough, you're not good enough, and it's just like this obsessive loop that you can never get out of, no matter what you do with your job, no matter how much money you make, no matter whatever it is, it's never enough, it's never enough, it's never enough. You're waiting for caregivers to love you. You're looking for perfect safety in performance and becoming who you think they wanted you to be. If you still hate yourself, if you think there is something fundamentally wrong with you, you are blaming yourself instead of being able to blame your caregivers. Generally speaking, this is what happens. Yes, this shit goes double for us neurodivergent whose caregivers rejected our disorders. Absolutely. And honestly, whatever it was about us that our caregivers rejected, we need to go through a period of time where we accept that our caregivers failed, that it was their fault, that they did this to us. And I know that the spirituality, self-help, and personal growth world says that's going into victim mode, that's disempowering, you're going to get stuck there forever, you got to take responsibility for yourself. And what I'm saying is, unless and until you go through the phase, because it will be a phase, but the phase of finally stopping blaming yourself for shit that is not your fault. You did not choose to hate yourself. You did not choose to develop your coping mechanisms, your self-sabotage, your self-rejection, the ways that you feel unsafe and afraid all the time, the ways that you people please, the ways that you're hyper independent, the things that you feel like you're never allowed to be, the toxic love dynamics you're constantly in. None of that was your choice. And none of it was because of you. This is the big thing we need to realize. It wasn't because there's actually something wrong with you. It was because your caregivers fucked up. Your caregivers were not able to see reality. It wasn't because of you. You didn't deserve it. You are not the reason your caregivers couldn't care for you. You are not the reason that they abandoned you or reject you. It wasn't because your needs were too much. It wasn't because your personality was wrong. It wasn't because you're too hard to take care of. It wasn't that. It was their lack of capacity. It has to be that you start to understand that it wasn't you, and it wasn't because of you. It's not that there is something actually wrong with you that made them do that. It was something wrong with them that made them do that. And when you can finally start to see that, and you can finally start to own that, that's when you can start to learn to love and accept yourself the way that you were never loved and accepted, to approve of yourself the way you were never approved of, to care for yourself the way that you were never cared for. Because you can see that they did it wrong. It wasn't you doing something wrong. Okay, so I'm convinced society encourages victim blaming because it refuses to understand its own actions and causing pain. Exactly. So for a period of time, you have to go into, whoa, my caregivers were shitty. They fucked up. Maybe they're great now, but they fucked up. They made me feel unsafe, and I'd had no control over that. I was a victim. To anyone who tells you you weren't a victim in your childhood, yes, you fucking were. I am so sick of hearing that. You were a child. You had no control. You had no autonomy. You couldn't leave when they were being abusive. You couldn't go find other people who accepted you and loved you. You couldn't provide for yourself. You couldn't interpret reality in any other way other than, they are hurting me. What am I doing wrong? You were absolutely a victim. And so if they weren't good to you, they set you up with foundations that they made a huge mess in your life that you now have to clean up. That is the definition of being a victim. You did not have power. You did not have choice. You did not have control. Don't let anyone tell you, yeah, well, you chose it in your past life, or, well, shut the fuck up. For a little while, no. You just need to be like, no, my caregivers were just shitty. And they shit on me, and they made a mess in my life, and now I have to clean it up, and that frickin' sucks. And you have to go through that. Because unless and until you do, you will stay stuck blaming yourself for shit that is not your fault. And then eventually, we get through a period of being angry at them, of being upset, of writing letters, of finally letting ourselves grieve and express and be validated. That no, that was just shitty. You didn't deserve it. It had nothing to do with you. It wasn't because of you. It's not because you were too weak. It's not because you were too much. It's not because you were too whatever. It was because they sucked. Period. That's it. They failed. They failed to be a secure connection for you. And that set you up for a lifetime of struggle and challenge and hardship that you didn't get to choose. You didn't opt into it, and you couldn't opt out of it. Compassion for yourself. And you get angry about it. And you get sad. You have to let yourself go through that. You finally purge the self-hate that you're constantly turning in on yourself by letting it get directed where it needs to go. And then eventually you're going to come to a place of, okay, now what am I going to do with this? This is what happened. They failed really bad. Now I have all this shit that I gotta clean up. How am I going to learn to be on my own side? How am I going to develop that witness capacity? How am I going to develop my adult perspective? How am I going to start to show up for myself in new and different ways? Take power in my life where I didn't know that I had it. Start to set boundaries. Start to realize that I can be rejected now and be okay. Like, all of these things will come with time. But if we try to do that before we let ourselves get mad, before we let ourselves blame them, we are always going to get stuck in, well, what's wrong with me? What am I doing? How am I the cause? Right? And yes, of course, in our adult relationships, things are different. We do have responsibility we have to take. We do cause things in our adult relationships. But that is not the same as how it was in our childhoods. Okay? The relationship we had with our caregivers is not the relationship we have with other adults. We were not responsible to them. We were not responsible to be good, or to not make a mess, or to not disappoint them, that was never our job as children. And if we grew up believing it was, that's a totally messed up thing. That's not how it's supposed to be in childhood relationships with our caregivers. Okay? So we have to process that childhood pain. And it's existential because it's admitting that caregivers are never going to love us the way we want to be loved. We're never going to get that safety. The world is never going to be a perfect place for us. We aren't going to improve ourselves into a state where the world is perfect and all pain goes away. And that is the hardest thing about this, is that we will hold on to self-hate because it's easier than admitting that the world is never going to be perfect and we are never going to be perfectly safe, and now we have to be adults and figure it out. It's hard. But that's what it is. When we get angry at caregivers, we're going to eventually have to face, okay, it's never going to be perfect. I'm not going to get that perfection, that safety, that love that I wanted. How do I learn to love myself anyways? How do I learn to support myself anyways? And that's all the other work that we do, right? That's why we have the mystery school. That's why I have all these videos. That's why I do coaching, because this is a long process. But again, I just really wanted you to understand. If your foundations were rotten, this is what your life is going to look like. And it's not your fault. And you have to get mad at the people who did it to you before you're going to be able to find your power and figure out what you're going to do about it. There is no way of escaping that anger part. You have to stop being angry at yourself, at turning it in on yourself. We have to get to a place where we accept it's never going to be perfect, that love is never coming. So now what are we going to do about it? And that starts with finally placing the blame where the blame belongs. They fucked up, and it wasn't because of you. Even if as an adult we can see that, well, they weren't loved and they weren't taught, great, fine. Maybe they shot you accidentally. Doesn't change the fact that they shot you. And now you have a bullet hole that you have to get treated. And you still have to go through all the phases of treating a bullet wound that you would have to go through if someone shot you on purpose or accidentally shot you. So I want you to think of it like that. Even if you can look back and be like, well, my caregivers didn't have good caregivers, or it wasn't their fault, or whatever. Sure. Doesn't change that you're going to have to get mad at them. You're still going to have to go through the exact same process of anyone who looks at their parents and say that my caregivers intentionally hurt me. Same. There is no difference. Eventually you can have true forgiveness and true compassion for them, maybe, if there's changed enough behavior. Or there's enough separation where you have taken responsibility for your life in the sense that you're in a safe place now and they can't hurt you and harm you anymore. Then maybe. But not right now. Not today. You're not broken. Period. End of story. Whatever's going on with you, there's a reason It's probably in your childhood. You're probably not having a spiritual attack. It's probably not something magical. It's probably just your garden variety self-hate because caregivers weren't good to you. And that's what needs to be addressed. You're not in toxic relationships because you suck. That's your love map that you didn't choose. You're not constantly self-sabotaging because you suck. You're not coping and doing your coping mechanisms because you're just horrible or lazy. It's because you don't feel good. You don't know how to be yourself. You don't feel safe because your caregivers didn't love you the way you needed to be loved. So we have to go through getting mad at them first. And then the healing can start to happen. But until then, you're always going to blame yourself for a thing that was never your fault. And then it's like taking an antibiotic when you have a parasite. Doesn't matter how much you take it. It's not going to work. Okay? Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. We do take responsibility eventually for what we can do now as an adult after we get mad. There's an order of operations, just like in math. If we do algebra in the wrong order, we never get the right answer. Okay? Don't try and skip this step. All right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'll see you when I see you.